How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today's video we look at everything regarding the new premium tanks that come into World of Tanks console. And today's video we look at the CAT, so the CAT. This is the G.I. Joe Season Cold War premium tank that basically makes you a butt ton of credits. This thing is an absolute credit machine, basically. You can farm so much, and I think today's video is mainly going to be talking about premium tanks and their current impact within World of Tanks and whether or not they're actually in a good place right now. Are Wargaming just constantly releasing more broken premium tanks, or is it just a case of, you know, sometimes they need to introduce some tanks that are generally better and that we kind of forget about the ones that are pretty terrible within the game itself? Now, of course, Cold War mode has the true vision, as you can see right here. Even tanks that aren't spotted are still spotted, if that makes sense. But yeah, so we've got the CAT. This thing has like 610 alpha damage. It's probably better than the tech tree counterparts for the American line, at least. Don't know how it compares to some of the T-72s, but this game kind of shows you exactly what this thing can do and how much damage it can push out very, very quickly. This one is probably the one you'll want to be getting out of the most recent premium tanks on the escalation era, at least in my opinion. I've played a little bit in the light tank, which was, yes, it was good, but I don't think it's got the pack-a-punch that this gun actually has, and the ability to actually have those fantastic games like this one does as well. So of course we're up to 1100 damage already. I know that that's only, what, 2 shots, but you'll see we can rack up so much more damage very, very quickly, and this thing is like a fortress if you play it right. My one problem that I kind of have within World of Tanks console's modern armor version, or the kind of modern tanks, is that often it just ends up, if you actually be a bit more passive for the majority of the game, you can basically just rack up so much more damage than if you were to be one of the first ones to get spotted, or the first one to actually move forward within the game. So I find it's kind of counterintuitive to be the first one on the front lines, for the most part at least. And so what you see me doing here is just making sure I'm kind of covering myself and keeping myself behind some sort of cover for the majority of the game, and trying to just defend the position against all of the tanks that are trying to push up. And certainly when you've got the high alpha damage that this thing has comparatively to the alpha damage of the light and medium tanks on the opposite side, then of course we're going to have some benefits. Now, into the crux of this video, I guess, with regards to premium tanks and how they compare, really. I feel like the modern way of World of Tanks is kind of, we release a broken premium tank that's just better in almost every single way than any other tank within the tech tree, and then it just becomes like this pay to win, not full on pay to win to the point where like you genuinely can just win and get or pay some money and get a 60% win rate, but it does become like, well, if you don't play in some of these competitive premium tanks that are just better in almost every single way, then you are going to have a worse win rate, especially if you're playing in something like, you know, the AMX Chaffee that we mentioned in the previous videos on the channel, of some of the older premium tanks, and the Super Pershing and the various different tanks that were designed a long time ago and that they've just been left so far behind to the point where players just cannot have as good or as big of an impact as they can with the modern tanks. And I feel like Wargaming are moving towards this whole, they make the tank really good in general for the most part, and then what they do is when they decide, like, not necessarily deciding that it should be super overpowered, but what they now do is kind of, they only give it one weakness, whereas before it used to be that it used to have one strength. So it just becomes this thing, like, you look at the Dragon, yes, the kind of only weak point of that tank is the fact that it gets very little armor comparatively. So I guess that's the negative of the tank, but then you look at every other aspect and it is just amazing. I know we've talked about this before, but I feel like it's an issue that definitely needs to be addressed within World of Tanks, and I think if we can actually help by just highlighting some of the tanks that genuinely need some problems or some fixes, I'm definitely making some videos regarding some of the premium tanks that have been left so far behind. But yeah, I think it's kind of important that we do talk about these things, and you'll see that within the next couple of videos that I introduce on the channel. And of course you can have a look at some of the older ones that we've done on some premium tanks that you probably want to avoid, and if you don't know what those are, then make sure to check those out in my channel. This is kind of a point in the match where, yeah, I've pretty much done every single thing that I can do. There's not a lot I can do against all of these tanks, and of course armor doesn't really mean too much on Cold War, at least from what I can gather. I know some people are going to be like, well, you can use armor, blah blah blah, in this like 1 out of 100 scenario. It's like, yeah, but for the most part, if you aim for the general weak points, being the lower plate or the side armor or these horrible cupolas on the top of the turret, and even saying that, like, some of the turret is just weak as paper, and so it's kind of pointless armor, at least from what I can see. So yeah, I don't think it's particularly very fun game mode to play, to be honest. But then again, that we're kind of moving away from the topic area, and that being the premium tanks. I think if I was wargaming, I would be introducing more and more kind of tanks that are more novel, rather than just introducing tanks that are more overpowered, which is what I seem to be seeing more recently. You know, you're getting tanks like the Dragon, which, yes, it's novel because it gets Hesh rounds, but that doesn't make it completely fine and balanced. It just makes it pretty overpowered. But what I guess we can take away from the fact that Wargaming are developing it in new tanks into these new game modes, I'm going to find it very, very hard for them to actually balance the tanks correctly. I think that that's the biggest problem we're going to be seeing within World of Tanks console in the near future. With regards to the Cold War mode, you can already see a lot of really, really good premium tanks that tend to be better than tech tree counterparts, and when there's not that many tech tree counterparts, when you're grinding through these tanks, like the T62, like all of the various different other ones, you're going to be at a significant disadvantage to people who have literally just paid money. And I get the fact that people need to pay money for a game to exist, but when it is so blatant and obvious, and when you're coming up against tanks that are just better in almost every single way, then I guess it's not fun for anyone, really. But then again, that's the price you pay when you actually pay your money, so I guess it's up to the person who decides to get their wallet out. But yeah, in terms of what I'd like to see in the future is just seeing some sort of system whereby they introduce kind of a voting system. It would be cool to see what players actually want within the game. I definitely am a big advocate for pushing for this kind of system, which allows you to vote on various different development stuff that you want to see in the game. If they could just put it as an extra tab in the garage that allows players to vote on the stuff that's going to be developed next in the game, I think that would be really, really good. Just allows for a lot more kind of activity, I guess, within the game, and I think that would be really, really cool. You know, you'll have the ability to decide what the next content is, or at least have your say, whereas now you kind of can only develop it slightly by posting on the forums, posting suggestions, but Wargaming don't really have any key statistics, and it's hard for them to say that your suggestion's actually good, especially when they kind of it's only one person's suggestion, whereas if they get a big poll, then it's a little harder to avoid the whole fact in itself. So I think having a system in game as just another tab, like we have the profile tab, like we have the tech tree tab, just have another one being the community tab, which has things like guides, it has things like all of the various different other kind of useful stuff that people could use and use to get better, and have all of this new information for people to have a better game, basically. And I think that having the poll system, the voting system, the community system to have a look at the most recent tabs and stuff like that, I think that would be super, super cool to see within World of Tanks console, and I think it's an area of the game that's kind of lacking right now, and let's just hope that it doesn't continue in the same kind of light. Obviously, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I'm very, very interested to see what you guys have to think, because obviously I'm just one person. Like I say every video, my view does not mean any more than your guys's, and I'm kind of just trying to convey my own point, get a few ideas going, and then obviously having you guys talk about it is always good for the game, and I feel like maybe, just maybe, we can get some good stuff coming out of the game. As for how premium tanks and the whole economy and the monetization of World of Tanks is going, I feel like a lot of the development is just going into pure monetization content, which, yes, for the most part, it makes some money, keeps the game going. Yes, it's new content, so people enjoy it, but sometimes you do need to take a step back, redesign your game, add in some extra actual good content that is free for people, like free tanks, like we did in the poll recently, which covered a variety of different things, I just asked basically which one you would like to see next, new maps or updated maps being the focus. Would you like to see more premium tanks? Would you like to see a new tech tree line? And of course, the majority of you said the new maps and the new tech tree lines would be really, really cool. Of course, we could have things like the Japanese light tank line and the Japanese like tank destroyers maybe. Interesting to see if Wargaming kind of carry out any more development into the World War II tech tree lines, because that is something I really want to see. I think that it would be cool. I think that, you know, even if they added in these tanks, you know, the brand new ones into the World War II mode as well, maybe just make this the true vision mode and then have the modern tanks within the normal game as well. I think that would be a good idea and a good way to move forward, because yes, if you like True Vision, you can play this mode. Fantastic. If you don't like True Vision, the only way you can play modern tanks is by having to play True Vision, which kind of is counterintuitive, and similarly the same way around. Maybe just have two kind of modes, one being True Vision, one being the standard, and then be able to play any of the tanks within the game in any of the modes you like. So have True Vision for World War II and Cold War all in one, and then have Cold War without True Vision and also World War II without True Vision all joined into one. I think that would be a good change for the game. Of course, people will be upset with that. I don't know how, because you can just play the same tanks anyway. But yeah, interesting to see what would happen to the matchmaker and how many people would decide to just play the one without True Vision and the one with True Vision. Of course, this game had a good one. 8,858 damage, 1,294 assistance, bringing the grand total above 10,000, which doesn't happen all too often, at least on World War II. I know that it's very, very more common on the Cold War game mode, but we did pick up 244,937 silver, which is fantastic. And may I just say, if you want to earn silver playing the Cold War mode with a premium Cold War vehicle, something like the Mobat, if you get to tier rank 100 on the season pass, this costs like 2,000 gold. It's definitely worth it, because you will make so much more silver on this mode compared to the standard World War II mode. And so if you want to earn money on World War II, you have to play Cold War to maximize the credits, if that makes sense. So yeah, definitely a game that I think you should try out. Definitely give it a go, because yes, I haven't played too much of it. Yes, I think I've been fairly critical. Yes, it's not awful. I don't think it's a terrible game mode, but it's not one I enjoyed all too much. I just think you can do better if you stay further back and then just snipe people. I just find that that's not the kind of gameplay I'm that interested in personally, because I like to be super aggressive, and if you're super aggressive on this, it doesn't really work very well. But yeah, obviously, let me know what you think. And of course, in the comment section down below, if you've played the Cobra Cat, let me know what you think of that. And what do you think of all of the new content that Wargaming are producing? We'll have a look at the statistics of the Cobra Cat in just a second, and then compare it to kind of the tech tree, just to showcase exactly what I mean by they're better than the tech tree counterparts in-game. And so here we are in the garage. Of course, we've got the Cobra Cat, the one we've just featured in the gameplay. We're going to compare it to the tech tree counterparts. Of course, it's a bit of a novel one, because it's not got any real tech tree counterparts in terms of free tanks that you can get. But if we compare it to the other heavy tanks of the tier or the era, then of course you've got things like the M60, which is, well, the M60A3, which, to be honest, isn't really a heavy tank. It's kind of more of this medium tank, I guess. There's definitely what you could call it more so as, because it just doesn't have anywhere near the armor that will ever really bounce anything, especially when you have penetration values of like 347 millimeters on your guns, and you've got 430 with premium. Bouncing anything in something like the M60A3 is very, very unlikely, and so even when you compare it to things like the Russian ones, the kind of Cobra Cat has generally a better kind of armor model. I guess you could say, however, that the T72 AV has really, really good armor in terms of the way that it's kind of laid out. You've got the spaced armor that's chucked all over it, and so being able to pen it reliably is kind of hard. It's not necessarily an easy one, and certainly if they're side scraping and using the armor model of the tank very well, then you're going to have a little bit of trouble. But for the most part, you can shoot it through the lower plate. Yes, it does have spaced armor on the lower plate, however, for the most part, you can still go through it anyway, and of course, if you get the side of it, you can go through the tracks and into the hull of the tank. Obviously, you want to hit a little bit lower to avoid that spaced armor that's kind of sitting on top, which is this one here on the side of the tank, and that kind of spaced armor there that's also on the side of the tank as well. So you want to aim underneath both of those, and you'll be able to hit that kind of panel that's right underneath all of those that kind of, if I can find it, will go and run alongside all of it. But yeah, that's kind of the model of the tank, and when we compare it to the actual Cobra Cat itself, you can see that the armor seems to be slightly better, or at least in my opinion. It is quite boxy, however, so your upper plate, your lower plate, not particularly great. Of course, you have the big cupola, which is slightly harder to kind of avoid getting hit. Turret cheeks are fairly flat, so yeah, you're not going to bounce as much as you are in the T72 AV from the front, but I guess that's kind of the model of the tank, and so you have to take it with a pinch of salt. You do get the higher alpha damage, 610 alpha damage, which means you can rack up damage very, very quickly. And when we have things like the module viewer and the detailed statistics, you can see that this tank has a really nice range of statistics. You've got 2.3 second aim time, which isn't awful, 0.37 accuracy. I think that's with the bonuses that we've got from the vertical stabilizers, but if you put on a nice skilled crew and you've got all of the various different statistics, that can get even lower, so it's absolutely fantastic for getting some damage at long ranges. Of course, you've got decent kind of ammo speed as well on your standard rounds, 1745 meters a second on your standard rounds, which is amazing. So basically you just don't miss with this thing. You get the APFSDS rounds, which are really, really high velocity rounds, and they're really, really good. You also have super high speed in this thing. Like when I say, 80 kilometers an hour, some of them won't ever reach up to that. This thing actually does. This thing is fast as hell. This thing will get up to top speed. And when you compare it to something like the M1 Abrams that's in the Western Alliance being a tier 3 tank, yeah, it's actually so much nicer. You've got kind of the hull armor of the M1 Abrams, I guess, at era 2. And this is the problem I'm having with some of the premium tanks. It's like, yes, it has a massive gun. Yes, armor doesn't really mean anything for any of the tanks in era 2, to be honest, because the penetration values are just so high. And when you've got high penetration on your standard and premium rounds on this thing, it means that what is the actual point in kind of playing any other tank, because it will have less alpha and less chance to bounce and less health. So yeah, this thing is fairly fast as well, so it's not even like it's super slow to kind of account for that. And that's kind of the thing, I guess, that you'll have a problem with if you're playing on Cold War and you're trying to have some good games. This one is one that will just genuinely surprise you so much, and it's so amazing in game. It's definitely one I would recommend. I mean, if you don't have any of them, I mean, to be honest with you, considering the season pass has the MOBAT, I wouldn't recommend actually purchasing it, to be honest with you, because the MOBAT is going to be fairly similar. It's going to play the exact kind of same sort of playstyle. If not, it is the exact same tank. I think it might even be, oh no, it's slightly different. But of course, with the Cobra Cat, it has more penetration on its standard rounds. It's got more damage. It's got the same amount of hit points. It goes faster. It's got slightly better vision range. So I guess you could compare it a little bit, but for the most part, I think I'd rather have the Cobra Cat with its alpha damage increase, and of course having that slight hit to vertical, or not vertical stabilizers, but the kind of way it plays. I definitely would rather have the Cobra Cat because of the alpha damage and all of the various other things that are just more useful in terms of playing World of Tanks console. So yes, this is probably better than the Mobat, which is kind of the only other tank that is very, very similar at the same tier. So yeah, if you want to pick up a really, really good kind of, I wouldn't say it's overpowered, although I would, but I've not played enough to say that it's super overpowered at this tier, but it definitely is really, really strong from what I can tell after playing like 3 games in it or something. It's so amazing. But yeah, definitely a tank that's worth it if you're interested in your heavy tanks and you want to play Cold War and make a butt ton of credits as well. This thing's really, really good. Even on terrible games where you only pick up like 2k damage, you can have like 100,000 silver earned, so it's super easy to earn silver, and definitely if you're looking forward to playing some of them, then I would recommend it. Other than that, I mean, in terms of when you compare it to other tanks that have been released recently, you have things like the Bisonte, which is awful. I wouldn't recommend purchasing the Bisonte. It is terrible. The DPM on it is awful. The speed is very, very slow. It doesn't get up to 50 kilometers an hour very quickly. To be honest with you, it's a pretty shoddy tank. And I definitely really wouldn't recommend it. I mean, if you're really interested in getting your Italian heavy tanks, then maybe, but for the most part, if you're trying to play in some autoloader, I'd much rather play in something like the T77, which isn't even that amazing anyway, but it's definitely better than this one. Yeah, if you're interested in that, then maybe purchase something else like the T54E2, the American autoloading heavy tank / medium / broken tank. It's just better in every way. Definitely not a tank I'd go for, the Bisonte, but yeah, it kind of shows that Wargaming maybe aren't just releasing now broken premium tanks. I mean, even the AMX Chaffee at tier 6, or the Super Chaffee I should say, wasn't as good when it got released. It's pretty mediocre. It's not a tank that's actually that good, so I guess in World War II mode they're actually introducing tanks that are worse than some of the tech tree counterparts. I don't think that this tank is very good. Wouldn't recommend it personally. You've got things like the Rover in the game, which is just 9 times out of 10 better than this tank in almost every single kind of scenario that you could take it in. But yeah, you can see kind of the level of development, and I guess that Wargaming have been trying to avoid making such overpowered tanks because it's been a while since they've released some absolutely disgustingly overpowered premium tanks on World War II. I don't know if that's just because they've stopped making premium tanks on World War II or not, but of course you can let me know in the comment section down below, and of course it's always good to get a bit of a discussion. I know this has been a fairly long one and a fairly less direct video with regards to the content that's within it, but I think it was always cool to chat about the premium tanks and the way that the kind of monetization's going and how the game's kind of developing away from certain different aspects with regards to the premium tanks and stuff like that. So yeah, very interesting one for me to talk about, and of course I love reading the comment section within the videos, and I do generally read most of them, if not all of them. Of course, I'm only one human being, so I can't read thousands of comments within like a week, and I've got loads to catch up on from when I was away. But yeah, definitely will try my best to have a look through some of the comments very, very quickly. And of course, let me know what you think of this video. Did you like it? Then be sure to subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. If you liked it, then obviously leave a like if you do want to. And if you didn't like the video, of course, leave a dislike, but please feel free to let me know why you didn't like the video in the comment section as well. If you didn't like it, what would you like to see changed? And of course, a massive thank you to all of the channel members who support the channel in more ways than others, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah, definitely a big thumbs up to you guys and for everyone that's watched the video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.